My name is Claire Morrison, and on my birthday, my mother stood in the middle of a crowded family party, raised her wine glass and declared, "From today on, you have no rights to this house." The house I had quietly paid almost all the mortgage on, fixed every shingle on the roof, laid every tile. Now she had transferred it to my younger brother as if it were a gift. Have you ever had your own mother take away something you poured your whole heart and energy into keeping? If this story feels familiar to you, leave a comment, hit like, share it, and subscribe with the bell on so we can walk through every truth that followed together. Because what happened next would make you see your family in a way you never could before. I remember so clearly the weeks before my mother said those words. The atmosphere around me had already started to change. Not loud, not direct, but a strange, calculated silence that makes your skin prickle. Normally, whenever Christmas or someone's birthday was coming up, the Family Forever group chat on my phone would be buzzing non-stop. Updates about who was bringing which dish, what time to show up, photos of the kids, all sprinkled with familiar jokes. This year the screen was blank. I opened the messaging app, scrolled down, but the group chat had vanished from my list. I told myself it was probably just renamed, or maybe I'd tapped something by accident. But when I opened Google Calendar to check the family events, usually marked in bright red, I saw nothing but a white, empty space. No winter festival, no traditional dinner before Christmas Eve. Not even the note, "Bring the pie like every year," that my mother always reminded me about. I told myself maybe they just hadn't planned it yet. But my email inbox gave me a different answer. Between utility bills and work messages was an email from the bank. "Notice, the property owner for the address has been updated." I read that line over and over, feeling the words press heavier on my chest each time. The house on Willow Street, the house I'd been paying the mortgage on every single month, had suddenly changed owners. I immediately opened my banking app and scrolled through each payment. Still there like clockwork, almost 5 years without a single late payment. From the roof I had replaced last year, to the kitchen I redesigned from scratch, to the French windows I had ordered from another state. Every part of it was my money and my work. And now I was asking myself, if it's not mine anymore, why am I still paying for it? That night, I opened my laptop and went through every payment confirmation email, every renovation receipt, every before and after photo, saving them into a separate folder. I named it Willow House Records. My fingers trembled slightly as I clicked Save, not out of fear, but with a vague sense that I would need it soon. The next day, I tested the waters by texting my brother Carlin. "Carlin, is there anything special for Christmas this year?" No reply. An hour later, I got a message from my mother. "Don't worry about Christmas. Everyone's busy, you should take time for yourself too." Just one sentence. No asking how I was, no mention that I was no longer part of any plan. I read it again and again, feeling like I'd just heard the click of a lock closing softly behind me. I thought back to last year, when a meeting with a client ran long and I arrived at the Christmas dinner later than planned. I carried a box of cookies still warm from baking all night, and a few gifts I'd spent the week picking out. But when I stepped into the living room, no one looked up. Every chair around the table was full, conversations flowed, but no one made room or even signaled for me to sit. I ended up at the kitchen counter with a paper plate, no napkin, while someone muttered, "Look who finally decided to show up." Laughter followed from the table. At the time I excused them. People get busy, the holidays are stressful. Maybe they just didn't notice. But now, looking at my mother's text, I knew I'd been wrong. This silence wasn't accidental. It was orchestrated. I opened my laptop again, went to the Willow House Records folder, and then started a new spreadsheet. I typed in each item. December mortgage, $1,842 a roof repair, $14,500 kitchen renovation, $21,000 French windows, $6,200 electric, water, internet bills. As the numbers stacked up, I felt both dizzy and oddly clear-headed. I was starting to realize that everything I had contributed had become something they took for granted, and that's why they thought they could erase me without consequence. I tried sending another message, this time to the family email group. Before, whenever we had gatherings, someone would send out a spreadsheet assigning dishes, who would greet guests, who would decorate. I typed just one line. What should I bring this year? The email bounced back. Recipient does not exist. It's hard to describe the feeling, like being cut out of a family photo, not with scissors but with a deliberate series of mouse clicks. I sat still for a long time, then asked myself, if you were in this situation, would you stay silent or speak up? Tell me what you think, because sometimes just one shared thought can give someone in the middle of it the strength they've lost. Late that night I walked around the neighborhood. Winter had begun, houses on both sides of the street glowing with white and gold Christmas lights. My apartment stayed dark. No tree, no wreath on the door. I stopped in front of a small store still open, bought a box of herbal tea and went back home. As the water boiled, I sat by the window, watching the first snowflakes fall softly onto the street, and wondered, when did they start planning to cut me out of their lives? The answer came sooner than I expected. A notification popped up. Madison, my cousin I rarely spoke to, had sent me a private message. But it was the kind of message that would change everything. I opened Madison's text. There was just one short line. You need to know about this. Under it was a blurry photo of a printed document, the corner smudged like it was snapped in low light. I zoomed in. It was a property record from a local law office. The bold line at the top made my throat tighten. Transfer of ownership for the property from co-owners. Dolores Morrison and Claire Morrison to sole owner, Carlin Morrison. Effective date: 2 weeks ago. I stared at it like watching a crack spread slowly across glass. Everything I had only suspected was now real. My name had been removed from the deed. For the house I had almost finished paying off. I called Madison immediately. She answered after one ring, her voice hushed like she didn't want anyone to hear. I'm at the office, but I can't talk long. Yesterday I saw this on Mom's lawyer's desk. I know you haven't signed anything recently. Right? I exhaled slowly. No. The last thing I signed for the house was over 3 years ago, when Mom asked me to do the authorization paperwork for the roof insurance claim. There was a pause, then Madison said, "Then, they used that." I straightened in my chair. What do you mean? The authorization you signed back then is still valid. And if it doesn't specify limits, they can use it to sign on your behalf for certain transactions. I'm guessing Mom brought it in and used it to transfer the house to Carlin. I bit my lip. When I'd signed that paper, I'd been in the grocery store, holding a bag of vegetables. My mother had said casually, "It's just for the insurance, honey. Sign it for me, save us some time." I had trusted her completely. Are you sure? I asked, hoping she was wrong. I can't be 100%, but I heard her tell the lawyer, "Just use the old paper, she won't notice." Madison's voice dropped even lower. "I don't know what else they're planning, but you should check with the bank right away." I thanked her and hung up, then went straight to my computer. My bank account still showed the monthly mortgage payments being pulled from my account. No changes. Which meant that even though I was no longer an owner, I was still paying for the house. That now belonged to someone else. Scrolling through recent transactions, one caught my eye. Mortgage refinance disbursement. $150,000. My heart pounded. I opened the PDF statement and saw it clearly. Carlin Morrison listed as the new sole owner, with a co-signature from Dolores Morrison. So my brother had refinanced the house and taken out a $150,000 loan. I didn't know where that money went, but I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't coming to me. That night, I drove aimlessly around the city, my mind racing. I thought about all the times my mother said, "Don't worry, I'll handle the paperwork," about every check I wrote without question. It all connected now, painfully clear. By the time I got back to my apartment, it was just past 8 p.m. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my phone, and scrolled through old messages with my mother. I found one from last year where she'd asked me to cover the heating repair. "So it's ready for winter, and I'll pay you back." I'd paid over $6,000. Never saw it again. I wondered, how long have they been discussing this? How many decisions were made in meetings I was never invited to? Images filled my mind. My mother and Carlin sitting with a lawyer, flipping through papers, signing my name with a pen I'd never touched. I pulled out my personal file box and found the copy of that authorization from 3 years ago. The words "no limit on scope" stood out like they were mocking my naivete. I stared at it for a long time. I remembered her smile, the warm hand on my shoulder. "You're the best at handling these things quickly for me." Now I saw it wasn't praise. It was a test to see how easy I was to trust. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk and typed out a to-do list. 1. Contact a private attorney. 2. Call the bank to confirm details of the refinance. 3. Archive all payment and renovation evidence. 4. Find a way to prove abuse of the authorization. Outside, the snow fell harder. The streetlight glow stretched across my window in long, cold lines. I realized this fight wasn't just about a house. It was about what I had been in this family, a member or just a source of money. The next morning I called the bank. The representative, a young-sounding woman, said, "Yes, the record shows the ownership was changed to Carlin Morrison on that date, with a consent signature from the former co-owner." The former co-owner being me, correct? Yes. Yes, Ms. Morrison. And your signature is on file. I let out a small, bitter laugh. I never signed that paper. Silence on the other end then. "In that case, you'll need to speak with your lawyer. The bank can't intervene without a legal ruling." When I hung up, the forged PDF signature still sat open on my screen, each sloppy pen stroke pretending to be mine. I knew I'd face obstacles. But in that moment I didn't feel fear, just a cold clarity. The truth was plain now, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The snow was still falling outside. I closed the curtains, took a long breath, and prepared for the next step. Because I knew when someone's been pushed out the door, they only have 2 options: wait for it to be opened again or find their own key. And I've never been the waiting kind. I thought I'd have to handle this alone, until Madison reached out again that afternoon. She video called me, her face a little tense under the harsh office neon light. "Claire, can you talk right now?" she asked quickly. "Yeah, I'm home." "What's going on?" Madison took a deep breath, then held her phone closer to her computer screen. An audio window was open, the recording icon flashing red. "I overheard and recorded something," she whispered, her eyes darting like she expected someone to walk in. "Yesterday, when I went to Aunt Dolores's to drop off paperwork, they were meeting in the dining room. The door wasn't fully closed, and I heard everything." I tilted my head. "You recorded it?" Madison nodded. "You need to hear this." Then she hit play. The first voice came through clear, my mother's. "Claire always acts like she's important, but really she's just a walking wallet. As long as she keeps paying, we'll keep her name on a few bank papers. No need to stir things up." Someone laughed, it sounded like Carlin. "As long as she doesn't notice. Just leave things as they are, lest to split." Another voice, which I recognized as my cousin Byron, chimed in. "Don't stir anything up. Leave it all alone, keep it clean. No need to complicate it." Then came the sound of glasses clinking, chairs sliding. No one objected. Not a single word in my defense. I sat there, my chest sinking like someone had just dropped a stone into it. Hearing proof like this was nothing like guessing. It confirmed everything I'd suspected, and it was worse. Madison. My voice came out hoarse. Thank you for telling me. But why did you do it? She hesitated, then said, I couldn't stand the way they talk about you, Claire. Even if I'm not always close to you, I know you're the only one keeping that house standing. I didn't want to just watch. I looked at her on the screen, gratitude and sadness mixing in my chest. You know, if you give me this, things won't be the same anymore, right? I know. Madison pressed her lips together. But I think you've been silent for too long. I leaned back, the screen light washing over my face, and for a moment I felt a cold clarity slide in. This wasn't just family conflict. This was a strategy, a campaign to erase me from a picture I had painted the background for. Keep the original, Madison, I said slowly. And don't tell anyone you gave it to me. I won't, she nodded. Claire, what are you going to do? I didn't answer directly. Instead, I smiled, a smile without joy, and said, I'll let them think everything is still clean. After the call, I opened the Willow House Records folder and created a new file. Audio, Madison. I saved the recording with notes on the time, date, and participants. Everything had to be preserved carefully, leaving them no chance to deny it. That evening, while reviewing some contracts, I remembered my mother's words in the recording. As long as she keeps paying. That phrase kept echoing over and over. It made me realize something. They had never considered I might stop. In their eyes, I was an endless source of money, a habit they were used to leaning on. I got up and walked around my apartment. Every item here was chosen by me, paid for with my own work, and no one had the right to touch it. That real sense of ownership, something I'd never truly had with the Willow Street house, made me feel like I could breathe a little deeper. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was my mother's number. I didn't answer. The call rang several times, then went to voicemail. I tapped to listen. Claire, I think you're overreacting. We're still family. You know, property is just paperwork. Don't make this a big deal. Her voice was steady, like she was reading a script, without a hint of regret. I stopped the message before it ended. If anyone hears this story, I'm sure they'll ask, what would you do if you heard your own mother call you a walking wallet? Tell me what you think, because sometimes the words of a stranger are exactly what make you feel less alone. I went back to my desk and opened another document, a list of every expense I'd covered for the house, with proof attached. At the bottom, I added a new category: verbal evidence, source, Madison, recording dated. I knew this would be my trump card if I decided to bring it all into the open. When I was done, I closed the laptop. Outside, snow was falling softly, quiet enough that I could hear it tap against the window frame. This quiet was different from the family's silence. It held no exclusion or calculation. It was just peace. I sat by the window, thinking about how I'd use what Madison had given me. I didn't want to jump into a pointless shouting match. I wanted them to realize on their own what they had lost, and that they couldn't get it back. To do that, I needed patience, the right timing, and most of all, to keep myself from being pulled into their emotional games. From this moment on, I knew every move I made had to be calculated. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control of my own story. My mother and stepfather's 40th wedding anniversary was set for the following weekend. The location was still the Willow Street house, the one I had thought, just a month ago, I still co-owned. I found out not through an invitation, but from a photo Carlin posted publicly on social media. A 2-tiered white frosted cake beside a hand-painted wooden sign reading, 40 Years of Love, set right in the living room I had once paid to have refloored. I stared at the picture for a long time. No anger, no self-pity, just a cold clarity. They'd crossed my name off the guest list, Yet we're celebrating in the very house I'd paid to fix shingle by shingle. I wondered, do they think I'll just stand outside looking in, quietly paying the bills for parties I'm not invited to? That afternoon, I drove to a quiet cafe downtown. I needed a place to think without interruption. Sitting by the window, I pulled out my phone, called the electric company, then the water company, then the internet provider. My voice was calm and steady as I read out each account number. Reason for cancellation: the new owner will take responsibility for payment as of. I made sure the date and time lined up exactly with the peak of their dinner party. It wasn't about petty revenge. It was simple truth. If I no longer had any rights to the house, I no longer had any obligation to keep the lights on, the water warm, or the internet running for them. On the night of the party, snow was falling lightly. I wore a long knit coat, wrapped a scarf, and drove through the Willow neighborhood like a stranger. Near the house, I stopped at a hidden spot where I could see the dining room window through bare tree branches. Inside, everything glowed. The chandelier cast golden light over crystal glasses and pristine white plates. Laughter and music spilled out, even from where I sat. I saw Carlin raise a glass, say something that made the whole table laugh. My mother sat at the head in a navy blue dress, her hand on my stepfather's arm, her face radiant as if she'd never had conflict in her life. I glanced at my phone. 10 minutes until the power shut off. In that moment I felt no thrill, no gloating. Just the sense that I was resetting a boundary they had tried to erase. Like closing a door that had been left wide open for too long. Right on time, the lights inside flickered once, then went out. The music stopped abruptly. Golden light was replaced by thick darkness, save for the flicker of candles on the cake. Through the window, I saw people pulling out their phones, turning on flashlights. My mother shot to her feet, her mouth moving quickly, probably calling someone to find out what happened. I couldn't hear, but I could imagine the conversation. What's going on? Why is the power out? Let me call the electric company. Then someone being told, I'm sorry, this account was cancelled by the contract holder. If you're the new owner, you'll need to open an account in your own name. I pictured my mother's face in that moment. She couldn't call me, she'd blocked my number weeks ago. Carlin would be scrambling, trying to reassure guests it was just a technical glitch, when in reality it was the result of choices they had signed for themselves. I sat in my car, watching the house in darkness. Guests in formal clothes moved around, phone lights bobbing. Someone surely whispered, "What's going on?" I didn't look away. Not because I wanted to remember a victory, but because I wanted to etch it into my mind that, this time, I hadn't let my silence be mistaken for consent. A moment later, my mother stepped out the front door, wearing a fur coat, phone to her ear, walking quickly toward the driveway. She didn't look my way, of course not, but her face was tight, the smile from minutes earlier gone. I started my car and drove off before she could spot the familiar vehicle. The streets were cold and empty, the streetlights stretching across the snow. Inside, my breath fogged in thin clouds, and for the first time in months, I felt a strange kind of relief, the kind that comes from taking back control over what's yours. When I got home, I made a cup of herbal tea, sat at the table, and opened my laptop. Not long after, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. "Maribel, was that you?" And it stopped there, as if the sender didn't dare finish. I set the phone down in the soft yellow light. Outside, snow kept falling. I took a deep breath, letting the tea's warmth spread to my fingertips, and knew I had just taken an important step in a much bigger plan. Because I understood. This was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke with a different feeling. Not relief, not exactly tension, but something razor-sharp, like every sense was tuned. I knew I couldn't let yesterday end with the blackout, only for things to slip back to normal. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began drafting an email to the attorney a former colleague had recommended. I attached every document: the 3-year-old authorization form, the original mortgage contract, renovation receipts, bank statements, and Madison's recording. Each file was clearly named and numbered by date. I didn't want them to just hear my story. I wanted them to see an undeniable timeline, step by step. After sending it, I called the bank. It took several transfers before I reached the mortgage department. My voice stayed even. I want to request the bank open an internal investigation into the transfer of ownership of my property, based on the misuse of an authorization form. The person on the line hesitated. Ms. Morrison, in this situation, to halt or dispute ownership, you'll need a formal court order. The bank can only freeze related transactions upon legal request. Then I'll send that request through my attorney, I replied, each word deliberate. I knew I'd just laid the first brick in the next step, moving from personal reaction to a systematic action. That afternoon, I got an email back from the law office. We have reviewed your file. The evidence you provided is sufficient to file for a court order to temporarily halt all transactions related to the property until a ruling is made. I read that line over and over, as if a fog had just cleared from my view. While I was still reading, my phone rang. My mother's number. I hesitated, then picked up. Her voice was both soft and cautious. "Claire, last night, was that you? You mean the blackout? Cut income." I just wanted to say, "You didn't have to do that. The house, the paperwork. It's complicated. I did it to protect you." I let out a short, dry laugh. Not mocking, not amused, just the sound you make when something is too absurd. Protect me by removing my name from the house I've nearly paid off? Silence on her end. Then she shifted her tone. "You always make everything more tense than it needs to be. The family needs peace." "Families only have peace when members respect each other, Mom," I said, each word weighted. I hung up before she could reply. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the warm table lamp casting a golden glow over the stack of files I was organizing. On the table, steam rose from my mug, the scent of mint drifting lightly. I realized my hands no longer shook as I turned each page. Maybe because I had made up my mind. No one else was going to tell my story for me again. Just before 9 p.m., a new email notification popped up. It was from my lawyer. "We have officially filed for the temporary transaction freeze and sent notice to the bank. The refinance loan is likely to be frozen within the week." I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. I pictured Carlin getting the news, his face darkening when he found out the $150,000 couldn't be released. And my mother, she'd surely be furious, but this time she wouldn't be able to call and order me to fix it like before. I opened my eyes and looked around my apartment. Everything here was smaller than the Willow Street house, but it was mine. And that made it worth far more. I thought, if anyone listening to this story has ever felt their own family steal the fruits of their labor, remember this. You have the right to take back your voice. And if you want to follow me through the next steps of this journey, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss the latest developments. I took a sip of tea, the warmth spreading through my throat. The battle wasn't over, but I was no longer on the defensive. From now on, every move I made would be a calculated strike, and I wouldn't stop until the truth was put exactly where it belonged. 2 days after my lawyer sent the freeze notice to the bank, I got a text from a local journalist I'd worked with years ago. The sender was David Holt, an investigative reporter at the Asheville Chronicle. "Claire, I just received some documents about the Willow Street refinance. There are a few irregularities. If you're willing to talk, I'd like to meet." I stared at the message for a while. It wasn't hard to guess who had sent him the documents: Madison. But the fact that David was reaching out meant this had already moved beyond the family. And maybe, This was the moment to let people see the truth they'd kept hidden. I agreed to meet at a small cafe near his newsroom. When I arrived, David was already there with a thick file neatly clipped inside a plastic folder. He looked much the same as the last time we'd worked together on a community fundraising campaign. Slightly messy brown hair, sharp eyes, but a warm voice. "Thanks for coming, Claire," he began. "I want to show you this." He opened the file and pulled out several document copies. I recognized them instantly. The 3-year-old authorization form, the refinance contract with my forged signature, and a charity donor list naming my mother and Carlin as top philanthropists of the year. "These are copies from the Public Records Office and the financial report of the charity your mother's involved with," David said, tapping the spreadsheet. "According to this, they used the $150,000 from the refinance to sponsor this charity event. But in reality, the funds went through 3 different accounts before ending up back in the family fund." I stayed silent for a moment, holding back my anger. I wasn't surprised the money hadn't gone to anything legitimate. But hearing it from an outsider, with proof in front of me, made it heavier. "David, if I confirm this and give you the background, what do you plan to do?" I asked. He leaned back, looking me straight in the eye. "I'd write a full investigative piece, citing every document, interviewing the people involved, and letting the public see the truth for themselves. But I need your confirmation, and if possible, some direct accounts from you." I sat quietly for a few seconds, listening to the steady hum of the espresso machine behind the counter. In my mind, I saw my mother at the charity event, her hand on Carlin's shoulder, smiling for the cameras, soaking in praise for being generous. "You'll protect your sources?" I asked. "Absolutely," David nodded. "I've been doing this for 15 years and never exposed anyone." I exhaled, then began telling the story from the start, signing the authorization at the grocery store, the repairs I'd paid for, to the moment I discovered my name erased from ownership. I gave him Madison's audio recording and bank statements showing my payments. David listened, occasionally jotting notes, but never interrupting. When I finished, he said, "This isn't just a property dispute. This is an abuse of trust and a financial violation. The public needs to know that." He nodded. "Then let's tell them." We discussed how to proceed without crossing any legal lines that might hurt my case. David promised to let me see the draft before publishing. I left the cafe after sunset, feeling both lighter and braced for the storm ahead. 3 days later, the article appeared on the Asheville Chronicle's front page. "From philanthropy to misused funds: the secret behind the Willow Street house." The lead photo was my mother and Carlin at the charity event, beneath a transcript line from the recording. "As long as she keeps paying, keep her name on the bank papers." The story spread quickly. On social media, people shared and discussed it. Some comments were shocked, others angry. I got messages from people who'd known my mother, saying they couldn't believe it, and had always thought she was kind. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters asking for interviews, old friends calling just to say they were on my side. I could feel the shift. This was no longer confined to the walls of the Willow Street house. That afternoon my lawyer called, sounding pleased. "Claire, I just got word from the bank. The refinance loan has been officially frozen. They'll be launching an internal investigation into the forged signature. Also, the charity has temporarily removed your mother from the board." I simply replied, "Thank you." That night I got a short email from Carlin. "You've gone too far. Mom's falling apart. Hope you're happy." I read it, closed it, and didn't reply. I didn't feel happy. What I felt was relief, that finally the truth was beginning to speak for itself. Outside, the article kept circulating. The story had left my hands and become part of the community news cycle. And I knew, no matter how my mother and Carlin reacted, they couldn't erase what had been made public. just as they couldn't erase me from my own story again. The coverage spread faster than I expected. Within 2 days, the whole town seemed caught in a swirl of chatter. At cafes, grocery stores, even the supermarket parking lot, I caught looks that were part curiosity, part sympathy. Some people came up to talk. Others just nodded as if to say, I understand. But on the other side, I knew things were shaking hard. Madison texted me on Tuesday night. Claire, I think Mom and Carlin are having an emergency meeting. I just saw Carlin yelling into the phone with someone at the bank. I read it without feeling smug. My emotions were mixed. Part relief that justice was surfacing, part heaviness knowing this was the real breaking of a family. The next morning I got a call from my stepfather. He rarely called me, so his voice surprised me. Claire, she's really panicking. Your mother hasn't slept, just pacing the living room all night. Kept my voice calm. I understand. But everything that's happening is the result of choices she made herself. He sighed on the other end. I know. It's just, she never thought you'd react like this. Maybe that's the biggest problem, Dad, I said, my tone dropping. They thought I'd stay silent forever. He said nothing more, just wished me well and hung up. Around noon, while sorting through paperwork, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Carlin, short but dripping with spite. You're only doing this for revenge. That house was never really yours. Now congrats, you've ruined everything. I read it and left it unanswered. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew anything I wrote would be twisted into the version of the story they wanted to tell. Later that afternoon, Madison video called. Her voice was low, her eyes tense. Claire, they're calling me a traitor. Carlin says I'm the one who leaked to the press. Mom's crying, saying the family's been smeared. I looked at Madison's face, seeing the tug of war between guilt and resolve. You didn't betray anyone, I said slowly. You told the truth, and you gave them the chance to do the right thing before it came out. They chose not to. Madison swallowed and nodded. I know. I just didn't expect them to react this hard. I looked at my cousin for a long moment, realizing the bond between us had changed. Now we both knew exactly where we stood. That evening, as I was preparing a light meal, my phone rang again. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. My mother's voice came through, hoarse, tinged with anger. Claire, what do you think you're doing? You're dragging the whole family through the mud. I set the knife down and leaned against the counter. No, Mum. I'm bringing the truth into the light. The truth, she scoffed. You think those cheap papers are the truth? No, Mum. The bank records, the contract with my forged signature, and the recording of your voice, that's the truth. The press is just telling it. Silence. I heard her breathing hard, then the call cut off. I stood there for a few seconds, then went back to my unfinished salad. The storm outside was still raging, but inside my apartment, it was strangely quiet. Every so often, I'd get supportive messages from people who'd known me in the community. Some just wrote, "Stay strong, Claire." Others shared that they too had lost everything to their own family's hands. And if you've listened this far, I want to ask you, have you ever been turned on by your own family? If the answer is yes, leave a comment or even just a simple "I understand." Because sometimes just knowing you're not alone is enough to make you stronger. The next day, my lawyer brought news. The charity had officially removed my mother from the board, and the bank had begun a formal investigation. This was no longer just a private matter between family members. This was now a case that could lead to real legal consequences. I knew the road ahead would still be turbulent. But I also knew the weakest links in this story were starting to show, and the chain of silence that had held for so many years had begun to break. That morning, I woke earlier than usual. Outside my window, a thin layer of mist still hung in the air, but I knew today was important. the day I would officially sever all legal ties to the Willow Street house. I brewed a cup of black coffee, sat at the table, and opened the file I'd prepared a few days earlier. On top was the request form to remove my name from the mortgage. Right below it, the bank documents confirming I'd been a co-borrower all these years. I'd read every word multiple times, but I still wanted to make sure nothing was missing. Around 9 a.m., I put on a thick coat, grabbed the file, locked my door, and drove to the main bank branch. The morning air was cold and dry, the early sunlight cutting at an angle through the bare trees along the sidewalk. I felt both relieved and a little nervous, not from fear, but from the sense that I was about to place the final period at the end of a long, heavy chapter. Walking into the bank, the scent of polished wood and the distant sound of a printer brought back memories of my first visits here to sign loan papers. Back then, I believed the documents I signed were part of family care, a way to help each other. Now I understood they had been a tether binding me to a relationship that was no longer healthy. I stepped up to the reception desk and stated my reason. I need to speak with the officer handling real estate loans. I'd like to begin the process of removing my name from this mortgage. The receptionist typed quickly, then invited me to wait. Just a few minutes later, a man in his early 40s with a name badge reading Daniel Reed, loan specialist, stepped out. His voice was gentle but carried a certain formality. Morrison, please come with me. We went into a small office, softly lit, a clean wooden desk with a neat stack of files in the corner. Daniel sat down, opened the folder I'd brought, scanning as he asked, "Have you thought this through? Removing your name means you'll have no rights or obligations related to this property." I nodded, my voice firm. "I understand completely. That's exactly why I'm here today." He flipped through a few pages, then marked where I needed to sign. "All right, we'll proceed by the book. Sign here, and add the statement that you relinquish all rights to the property." I took the pen, my fingertips slightly cold, but my handwriting steady. Once I'd finished, I set the pen down and took a deep breath, as if letting go of everything I'd carried for so long. Daniel looked at me, then nodded. "That's it. The bank will update the records within 3 business days. From now on, all responsibility and ownership fall solely to the remaining party on the loan." I stood, shook his hand, and thanked him for his help. As I stepped outside, the sun had risen higher, lighting up the street ahead. On the way home, I stopped at a small park with a wooden bench facing the lake. I sat, letting the cold wind sweep across my face, and felt something strange. No anger, no urge to argue, only stillness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Madison. "Did you finish?" I replied. "Yes, it's done. From now on, they'll handle it themselves." Less than 10 minutes later, another text, this time from my stepfather. "Your mother knows. She stayed silent through breakfast. I think she understands this is the end." I looked at the screen and exhaled slowly. No sense of victory, no deep sadness. Just a door closing and me stepping through, leaving it behind. That evening I stayed home, made a pot of mint tea, and picked up a book I'd left unfinished long ago. My eyes occasionally drifted to the closed file neatly stored in the cabinet. I didn't need to look at it anymore, but knowing it was there reminded me that I'd untied that knot myself. Around 10 p.m. there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Madison holding a paper bag. She smiled softly. "I thought you might want this." Inside was a dark teal knit scarf. I recognized it instantly. My mother had given it to me back in high school. I ran my fingers over the yarn, feeling both familiarity and distance. "Where'd you find it?" he asked. "In an old box in the basement." I figured. "It belongs to you more than anyone." I nodded, inviting Madison, Indiana. We sat at the kitchen table, drinking tea and talking about small things, the weather, work, upcoming plans. Neither of us mentioned the Willow Street house. Maybe we both understood that tonight, it wasn't the center of the story anymore. Madison looked at me and said quietly, "I'm glad you did it. You seem lighter." Smiled. "Because I know from now on, I'm not living in a story someone else writes for me." We sat in silence for a while, just the ticking clock and the scent of tea in the air. I glanced at the scarf on the table, knowing I'd just closed a piece of my past to make room for what's next. The next morning, with sunlight streaming through the blinds, I sat in the kitchen with a hot cup of coffee. The apartment was so quiet I could hear the clock hands moving. The dark teal scarf rested neatly on the chair opposite me, a gentle reminder that even though what happened was real, I could keep a piece of memory without letting it chain me. I opened my laptop to check my inbox. A few work emails, a good morning message from Madison, and one from the bank confirming the name removal was complete. The phrase, "no remaining financial obligations or ownership rights," stood out at the bottom, and I lingered on it longer than usual. Leaning back, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. By midday, I decided to walk to the nearby park. The air still held a trace of late winter chill, but the sunlight was softer and pleasant. I sat on a wooden bench, watching kids play on the grass and older couples stroll slowly along the brick path. There was a simple peace here I'd never felt while tied to the Willow Street house, where every moment carried tension and caution. My phone buzzed, a message from my stepfather. "Your mother's asking if you'll come back for family dinner over the holiday." I read it once, then typed, "I appreciate the invite, but I think you should enjoy dinner the way you want." I wasn't angry, just no longer interested in sitting at a table where I'd once had to strain to prove I belonged. Later in the afternoon, Madison stopped by with a warm apple pie and a smile. "I thought you could use a little sweetness today." We ate pie, sipped tea, and talked about the future. Madison shared her plan to start working for a nonprofit in the next city over, a place where she hoped to contribute more without being held back by family expectations. I listened, proud and relieved that we were both finding our own paths. As she was leaving, she paused at the door and said, "You know, Grandma still asks about you. She doesn't judge. She just says sometimes the strongest person is the one who has to leave to protect themselves." I smiled, thanked her, and saw her to the elevator. Her words echoed in my head the rest of the evening. After cleaning the kitchen, I took the scarf off the chair, folded it neatly, and placed it in my closet. Not to hide it, but to keep it somewhere safe, the same way I wanted to keep myself. That night, I opened the window to let the night air in, reading under the desk lamp. Outside, the street noises faded until the quiet settled. I realized that for a long time, I'd confused the silence of being excluded with the peace of choosing who and what stays in my life. Now, this quiet no longer tasted bitter. It was simply mine. On Sunday morning, I drove out of the city to the lakeside road I'd loved but neglected for years. The water was smooth as glass, reflecting the pale blue sky and scattered white clouds. I stepped out, letting the wind play through my hair, and felt myself smiling, not from victory, but from finally feeling like I was exactly where I should be at the right time. Back home, I opened my desk calendar and circled today in red. Not to mark some grand event, but to remember this moment, the moment I truly knew I'd stepped into a new chapter. No more bitterness. No more waiting for recognition from people unwilling to give it. I set the pen down, closed the calendar, and took a deep breath. In my small apartment, everything was in its place. And for the first time in years, so was I. If you've just listened to the whole story, I want to know how you really feel. What do you think about what happened between me and my family? Is walking away to protect yourself selfish? Or is it the only way to keep your peace? Everyone will have their own answer, and I truly want to read your thoughts in the comments. If this story has made you feel understood, or made you reflect on the relationships in your own life, hit like and share so more people can hear it. Don't forget to follow the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next stories. Real slices of family life, where there's both love and lessons that sometimes come at a price. See you in the next story.